means your operating system will be destroyed. When people wake up to that, we will understand the true epic horror and nature of the 5G apocalyptic threat. It is the great existential threat. That's the credo. Those are the three key words. When you recognize that you're sovereign born, natural born, that you do not, in your highest expression, need to ask permission for anything, ever, at any point in time, the myth of time, provided you cause no harm, loss, or injury to another living soul, you're free to do what the hell you want, as you should be, not just on this planet, but on any plane of existence. So that is your foundation, that's your source code. Do no harm. And then express yourself to your highest potential and move into affirmation, move into creative expansion, move into the bliss peak wave, and do so unashamedly. That's the point of sovereignty. It's ecstasy, it's bliss, it's orgasmic, which is what our expression and our experience should be all the time, incidentally. Secondly, we've got more of a collective responsibility to take on this goddamn devil. And that means your local so-called municipal authority.
What can people do in that regard?
Sue the sons of bitches. Go and fill out damn forms in the local courthouse and take these local officials and safety and health regulatory officials, so-called officials, take them to court. Move in on their birth bonds. Take these people down, individuals, these goddamn technocrats and bureaucrats. They're the enemy. There's your terrorist organization. Bureaucracy, technocracy. That is endemic terrorism. They're terrorizing the living men and women of the living soil using their statutory bullshit dreamt up by little gray men with little gray dicks. You know, we've got to change that ourselves, because it's going to be living souls that eradicate the death cult. It's not going to happen for us. And it happens when you stand up on a minute by minute, day by day basis, and you challenge and you apprehend that rogue authority, like these swaggering pricks in costume, tasing people in the face, masquerading as being policemen. Take them down, people. This is frontline warfare.
Hello and welcome to World Awake TV. I'm your host Sky Cubby, and I recently caught up with activist, public speaker, publisher, writer, and filmmaker Sacha Stone at the 2019 Dimensions of Disclosure event in Ventura, California. And besides discussing a unique and innovative solution for 5G that can protect all of us, we got into some pretty incredible topics on sovereignty, why we should not be paying our personal income taxes, how to recognize more of your sovereignty by stopping asking permission from the authority figures for doing what we know is right to do in this world, why most relationships fail and how to find success in them, and so much more. Former rock musician Sacha Stone grew up in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe throughout the war for independence. As a war baby in Africa, later a refugee in Europe, then rock and roll artist and shock poet, evolving into citizen diplomacy, he realized how messed up the world was and how he must manifest the change he desired by embodying being a capacitor for change in himself, and thus inspiring change in others. He is the founder of Humanitad Foundation, a nonprofit for human rights, and the New Earth Project, and is an outspoken advocate of human rights and natural justice. Sasha has instigated peace initiatives and education programs and has lobbied against human rights violations and abuses in different parts of the globe, and continues to prosecute for the protection of breakthrough innovators, scientists, and doctors. Founder of the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, what he calls a jurisdiction for natural law to express itself. He also started the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into Human Trafficking and Child Sex Abuse, which he sees as being the Achilles heel instrumental for the takedown of the so-called deep state. So, without further ado, let's drop right in with Sacha Stone. I'm really excited to get into some incredible solutions that we actually have for what's being called the 5G apocalypse. And first, I do want you to share a little bit about some of the New Earth communities around the world.
Yeah, I'm not too up on the diversity of the New Earth nation as it stands today, because it's constantly evolving.
But we
planted the seed. We've planted the seeds, and we've created a series of templates, and we do have a very kind of disparate bohemian tribe scattered around the earth, which is true, and it finds its way in different modalities. We connect through the New Earth University, more or less. Yeah. There is a management and administration of sorts which kind of bumps into itself as well, but it's not an organization in the accepted sense. That's the point, and it doesn't have any clearly defined objectives other than inviting all living men and women of the living soil to step into sovereignty. Sovereignty being a precursor to actualized consciousness.
And these sovereign communities, I mean, it is so important for us to have the initiated in the mind, in the consciousness, and that template is there then to build upon. So how would you relate it to the Ubuntu movement, and are they
Well, curiously enough, Mike Tellinger sent me a beautiful message this morning, actually, too, saying, "Brother, where are you?" Yeah. Michael and Ubuntu were focusing more on the kind of political aspect of claiming sovereignty and defining a political remit, socio-political remit and socio-economic remit, whereas the New Earth Project, by distinction, is not focused on anything that's political or anything that's economic, much less social. I don't personally like politics or economics. I think they're both toxic, and I think they're both antithetical to true human sovereignty and true human consciousness. We ought not to be defining ourselves in terms of factionalism. That's what politics is. Defines my team versus your team and how we're going to get on together or not. You know, and economics defines to what extent we're going to screw each other over in business and exchange. So if we're going to go enlightened, let's go enlightened and step outside of politics and economics altogether. That's my take on it. But I completely get that the Ubuntu movement is a needful one to step from here to there.
Well, it does take a lot to transform the whole socioeconomic system. So to be able to actually do it, maybe it is more of a sovereign template, more freer, and you don't have to actually change so much, but it is a very different way of living. Can you say a little bit more on that?
You're talking about the New Earth way of living?
Yeah.
Well, that is stop asking permission. It all comes down to stop asking permission. In fact, that's the credo. Those are the three key words. When you recognize that you're sovereign born, natural born, that you do not, in your highest expression, need to ask permission for anything, ever, at any point in time, the myth of time, provided you cause no harm, loss, or injury to another living soul, you're free to do what the hell you want, as you should be, not just on this planet, but on any plane of existence. So that is your foundation. That's your source code. Do no harm.
Comes from there.
Do no harm. And then express yourself to your highest potential and move into affirmation, move into creative expansion, move into the bliss peak wave, and do so unashamedly. That's the point of sovereignty. It's ecstasy, it's bliss, it's orgasmic, which is what our expression and our experience should be all the time, incidentally.
Now, you are living this lifestyle and this concept in Bali to a certain extent.
Well, yeah, on appearances, yes.
As much as you can.
As much as one is able to construct that. But it's fraught with its challenges, put it that way. There's a lot of the egregore and tentacles and you know, sort of shadow work going on with people. And when you create conscious community, or you endeavor to create conscious community, you bring in a lot of the other without even knowing it, until you close the door and sit down on the floor and realize that half the folks in the house are not coherent to this value. They're there because there is something in them that is, in a sense, parasitic, and I'm not being cruel, but they need to feed off the light or the inverted light of others, and that in itself is also okay. You factor that in to a conscious community. I think absolution, redemption, love, compassion, empathy, all these things speak to the fact that we should be feeding one another in a sense. But I'm just saying that the process of actually embodying and manifesting conscious community is fraught, as anyone would tell you out there. You probably know yourself.
Out in Hawaii, we see lots of communities trying to make it happen, and there's fundamental things that don't work. And we found as clear as you can be, and as sovereign as each person can be, the more it works.
Right, and I maintain 7 years ago, whenever it was, 2013, I think it was when we kicked off. I maintained, what is it? Is my math good? Yeah, about 6 years ago. So I maintained at that time that there should never be a rule book. There should never be a codex, a code book. But what there should be is a foundational covenant that no one allows a grievance to move into the following sunrise. That's
nice.
it. So if anyone in the community or anyone in that enclave has a grievance with anyone, they need to address it on the day and not allow that shadow to start to emerge.
To build up,
which
and
it
resentment.
does.
And that's so important. My wife and I, we always make sure we go to bed happy and loving each other and forgive. And
all relationships break down, or let me put it this way, in my experience, in my considered experience, 90%, if not 99% of relationships end up taking a left fork in the road at some point because of a perceived grievance. It's not even a grievance that actually existed, but one party thought or felt something odd and then put out a shadow, and the other one felt awkward because that one was feeling awkward, and the next thing, a shadow emerges and feeds off the light and the life force of that relationship. That's your egregore working.
It's a real entity, it's a real being.
Absolutely.
And if we can just realize when we're projecting out, we're putting one finger forward and we're pointing three back to us. If we can get that, then that can do a lot.
Well, watch for the perceived grievance and look to your own heart on a minute by minute, day by day basis, and do that audit constantly with yourself. I think that's the key thing.
I love that, because if we're constantly stalking the shadow and looking inward to see that thread that got us off center, that got us, then we aren't going to be lashing out unconsciously, poking arrows at people. So thank you for that. I wanted to have you on the show because you embody in this disclosure movement, the care and concern for our health. And I did a health workshop at this conference, and we just got off the beach doing some chi energy breath movement. And there's not too many people here really embodying the health aspects, which are so important for our own personal ascension as we collectively ascend in this global awakening. Why would you call it a 5G apocalypse?
Well, if you saw my talk yesterday, I showed some grisly slides of a poisoning that occurred to me in 2016.
Wow.
And that, for me, was my wake-up call, because I was laid down for over about 3 months. And what was intimated at that time through intelligence, Canadian intelligence, in point of fact, was that it was DNA signature targeted bioweaponry, a test bedding of that technology, which we'd heard about some years previously in London when we'd spoken to some members of the intelligence community who said, oh, there is a unique weapon that is being developed which can target and dial into the isotope frequencies, or to the DNA signature frequency of any organism, and literally eviscerate it. Because what it does is it takes down the microbial cellular DNA, more or less leaves the human DNA intact. But as I said in my talk yesterday, when you consider that 99% of the DNA in your body is non-human, it's the microbial cellular DNA, that's where the takedown is. So the operating system of humanity and of Gaia, of Earth, is being taken down with 5G, whilst, to all intents and purposes, the human DNA element remains intact. Well, that's the cover story. When you really push governments and health and safety authorities into a corner on this matter, they say, well, we've done safety testing on human DNA with EMF and pretty much full spectrum EMF, and we can see that human DNA can withstand. That's true. But what they don't even know is that 99% of the cellular DNA in your body is non-human. So it means your operating system will be destroyed. When people wake up to that, we will understand the true epic horror and nature of the 5G apocalyptic threat. It is the great existential threat. I've spoken to weapons development experts, molecular and cellular biologists, political figures. I even got a letter after I made the film from a former CEO of the world's biggest satellite and telecommunications group, who wrote to me to say, just so you know, everything you said in that film is spot on, but it's marginally worse than even you imagined. Whoa, what? And I then met with this gentleman in London. And his words, and he said, you can quote me on this, the day 5G goes live, human life expectancy drops 75%.
Wow.
He's no longer in the telecom or satellite industry because he was unable to make any progress in advancing the lobby against it being unleashed. And he's transitioned into a whole new field of focus as a captain of industry. But my point is this. When you get intelligence operatives and you get leading scientists and biologists communicating to you, when you've got laboratories in Spain, Germany, and Switzerland informing us of the biohazardry of 5G, and no one talking about it, no one talking about the real threat. We're in complete dystopia and myopia as a civilization on this issue. And that, by definition, is an apocalypse as well. When the skin, the mask is falling away from the face. That's what's happening. And I'd say it's a good thing, ultimately.
See, we got to go direct to the source for things like this. Like when we had Del Bigtree on the show, and he told us similar things about the people that are talking directly to him, the studies that are actually being done. Now, are we talking about our actual biome, like our gut health, that is our primary brain? We wipe out the flora and things stop working.
Well, there's mirror neurons in the gut that mirror the brain. But yes, indeed, the third brain.
Because I had double pneumonia when I was 6 months, and they shot me so full of antibiotics that wiped out my first line of defense, and I spent a good part of my life trying to rebuild the healthy biome. So that's what goes.
And biome is everything. Biome is everywhere. We're only living and talking in this room by virtue of the biome in the air, without which there'd be no connection. You know, the biome in the oceans, the biome in the soil.
So we're talking about mycelial networks, a healthy...
we're talking about microbial cellular DNA, let's be clear, which is 99.9% of all the cellular DNA in existence that makes up Gaia, makes up this reality expression.
So we're talking about our bodies are built on so many of these healthy bacteria that are so important for our functioning. And when that's wiped out, that's why other animals, like we're seeing the bees dropping. And so these 5G panels are set up, and it moves through space in such a powerful way that it disrupts all that, and they're being set up almost on every street corner.
They are. We've checked on the way from Los Angeles to here, to Ventura. We were checking in the car. We know what to spot. But yes, every single street lamp that we saw has been weaponized. And you can tell because the top of the street lamps, they've got these little nub antenna that look like that, about that high. Where you see those on top, those are the vertical antenna that are receiving the signal, or intending to receive the satellite signature, and then broadcast on the lateral plane. And where you've got street lamps that don't have those antenna on top, they've not yet been weaponized. But even in London, because they know that we're onto them there, and this is where you need to study Dean Henderson and Serco, S-C-R-C-O. Anyone really wants to understand how this bullshit creeps surreptitiously into our lives, and with a $20 trillion rollout, without us even being aware, study Serco, S-C-R-C-O, Dean Henderson. That man has done magnificent work in exposing Serco. This is what's operating between governments at the level of schools, streets, municipal authorities, federal authorities. The Serco phenomenon is where this is being rolled out.
So as bad as things get, we are finding the solutions here on Earth, and I'm really excited that you found an incredible solution and to deactivate these waves, or to protect us. How does that work?
This is the Russian, you're referring to this, and this is a microcomputer which is throwing out a shield. We're told it's about 40 meters in diameter. We've got independent labs in Switzerland and Germany doing testing on this actually this week. But the point is that this is creating a quantum shield. And this is not like shungite or orgonite or any of these other more innocuous attempts of mitigating EMF.
Right.
Because 5G is way, way, way beyond that. This technology has been released by the Russians. And it's backed by the Russian Federation of Sciences, by the former director of the KGB, by good people in Russia who recognize that the 5G threat is an attempt to take down effectively the biome of the planet. Like Fukushima, the spill at Fukushima and Chernobyl, and many of these disasters have been engineered events, as I'm sure you know and most of your audience will know. But the point being that a group of Russian scientists, very, very advanced scientists, have been working for decades now on remediating those huge threats to the planetary biome.
And you were just on the Russian television speaking about this.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. This was designed in order to block Fukushima. When Fukushima was spilling across the oceans to the Russian borders, they got a directive, these scientists, create a counterpoint frequency value set that can be broadcast through a device that can be given to all of the citizens living along that coastline. And it was done, and they received it, and it works.
Wow.
So this is now quite old. When was Fukushima? I can't remember how many years ago it was. But this has been in development for about a decade now. And now it's got to a point where it's absolute. It's quantum shielding.
Well, I know our mutual friend, Dr. Patrick Flanagan, he said he had the solution to counteract, and he did talk about it in those terms as far as counteract the energy and the radiation coming from Fukushima if the governments were willing to cooperate.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this is something similar.
I'm familiar that there are other phase conjugate or phase coherent technologies that have been around. Richardson was one of the great scientists there, and to be able to counterpoint that. So again, those scientists, the Flanagans, the Dan Winters of this world, these people have understood for a long time about frequency and light, and that it is relatively straightforward using phase conjugation or phase coherence to block and then transmute a given frequency value set. And that's what the Russians have been diligently and mechanistically working on those solutions.
Wow.
So whereas our brilliant Western scientists like Flanagan and others have been underfunded or not funded at all and marginalized despite their genius, the Russians, on the other hand, were financed and funded by the state and said, go, make the solutions.
That's amazing.
So at least Mother Russia takes care of herself from all the poisons coming in. And now what they want to do is get this out effectively to the world. And no, it is not a Russian takeover. Russia has never infiltrated or attacked a country on Earth, other than Afghanistan, which was part of a Cold War proxy bullshit game that was going on. But the idea that Russia is a problem politically and strategically, that's something which people need to get over in their own mindset.
Oh, yeah.
That's a game that's been played out for us, you know.
It just such a mind twist to just pure manipulation through the media system.
Absolutely, and the Chinese are wanting to broadcast TCM or traditional Chinese medicine to the world. That's how they want to conduct war against the West, is with truth, with good old treatments and cures that extend life and eradicate disease. So you got good Russian technology, good Chinese technologies, and that's what we should be looking at those great big super states for sure.
Because ultimately it is all energy, and the energy medicine works because it absorbs the sun energy. The intelligence of the plant knows how to project out the right scalar frequencies to work with our bodies. So it just makes sense we'd work with it on an energetic level.
Of course.
Flanagan, as far as I understand, he says the megahydrate can be mixed into paint and painted on the towers to actually, the hydrogen ions can do something to shift it. And I don't know if that's true, but it does, hydrogen works on an energetic level, so maybe there's something there.
To me it sounds compelling. And what I'd love to do is I'd love to get that brief from you. I'd like to send that across to some of the Russian scientists, and they'll give an answer within 12 hours.
That would be
Let's
interesting.
do that.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. But we have a solution we know does work. So can you share a little more about how people can use this technology in their lives? How do they get a hold of that? How do they protect themselves?
Well, there is a website that I believe went up this week, because I got word of that yesterday, and it was deluged after my talk. And it's www.5gbbioshield.com. So
there it is.
Anyone can go on and check out and read up the science and check the thermographic and electrographic scans and see what's coming out. Please understand, this has only been the last 2-3 weeks. We've been involved with this for about 3 weeks, and we're trying to get this out as quickly and as widely as possible.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, indeed. I'm thrilled by this.
Have you tested the actual towers here in the area? Because what do you think about this idea that Trump is rolling out the 5G network, and in some way it's safe?
I'm a huge fan of Donald Trump, and I'm unapologetically so.
Okay.
Huge fan. I'm as much of a fan of Donald Trump as I am of Vladimir Putin. And I hate politics, all politics. But these two archetypes incarnated are just, for me, the greatest double act that I could have wished for as a long-standing 21-year political activist and frontline activist. Right. For me to see the real dynamics. I'm not talking about the bullshit that comes onto the Herald or the Telegraph or the BBC or the CNN. I'm not seeing any of that stuff. The real brushstrokes of politicking and diplomacy that are going on behind the scenes and under the table. The chess that's being played is, for me, exquisite. I know enough about power play and diplomacy to know that what I'm seeing is majestic and extreme.
We're seeing, under the Trump administration, clear skies for the first time in a long time.
We're seeing a whole lot of beautiful stuff emerging, right? Simple as. And we're seeing the death rattle of this kind of demonic voice of idiocy, which I think, I don't want to get into politics, but the Democratic Party in this country, for me, perfectly represents that aggregated idiocy. It's liberal intellectual hysteria that believes itself to be ahead of the game, but is so far behind the real game of humanity and sovereignty, it's terrifying. Because these people are well educated, they conduct themselves impeccably, they have all the social graces, and they are so absent in goddamn foundational intelligence, it's terrifying. And we in the West, in Europe, are watching that play in the United States, and it's staggering. Yeah. But it's a death rattle of that liberal intellectual echelon. And I think about bloody time. The East and West Coast have for the last 100 years postured as being America. No, they're not. The East Coast and the West Coast, New York and Los Angeles, are not America. They represent the antithesis of America in many respects. And I'm saying that, counting a great many friends of mine as people living in LA and New York. Midwest America, the pulse of Middle America, that's the creature I love. That's the animal I love and have loved for a long time. And that's the only voice worth listening to, because there's an intelligence, a psionic gut intelligence amongst the Midwestern American pulse that is so ahead of the game. And that's the thing that's coming back and reclaiming true sovereignty. So when America engages its supernature, which it's about to, it's going to be courtesy of that common pulse.
That's amazing to see someone standing up, telling the media, you guys are fake news. And it's hard for people to grasp this, but it is something that if you do the research, all this checks out. So you do believe that these towers are going to be protected in a similar technology?
My takeaway on this, and
because the Russians, he's got a connection there.
Oh yeah, big time. I don't believe for 1 second. Number one, Vladimir Putin banned 5G 6 days ago. Okay, done. He did it 6 days. It's banned in Russia. I think he's kept 2 or 3 frequencies open for military communications, for covert communications.
Sounds like an evil supervillain. Get rid of that 5G.
He's foundationally banned 5G. That happened last week. You can put that in the bank. Donald Trump, in my view, and part of what I believe to be the genius of the man, is that he appears to be allowing the private sector to roll out the multi-billion-dollar infrastructure investment so that he doesn't need to, so the government doesn't need to. And let the private sector do the investment into this superstructure, this huge infrastructure, and then the Pentagon will override the frequencies and impose affirmative or Tesla-based frequencies on the day, which they can do. And if you study the executive orders, you can see that they've already begun to provision for the Pentagon to be able to override the telecom frequency values that are released at any given time. So to my mind, that's all we're seeing. We're seeing a clever permission of the private sector to make the investment, but it'll be overridden, and I don't believe the weaponized 5G will be released. But again, don't put that in the bank. I still think right now we've got to seriously mitigate two things. One, we've got to try to mitigate our own exposure to these harmful ionized, non-ionized radiations, number one, to the best of our ability for ourselves and our families. But secondly, we've got more of a collective responsibility to take on this goddamn devil. And that means your local so-called municipal authority.
What can people do in that regard?
Sue the sons of bitches. Go and fill out damn forms in the local courthouse and take these local officials and safety and health regulatory officials, so-called officials, take them to court. Move in on their birth bonds. Take these people down, individuals, these goddamn technocrats and bureaucrats. They're the enemy. There's your terrorist organization. Bureaucracy, technocracy. That is endemic terrorism. They're terrorizing the living men and women of the living soil using their statutory bullshit dreamt up by little gray men with little gray dicks. You know, we've got to change that ourselves, because it's going to be living souls that eradicate the death cult. It's not going to happen for us. And it happens when you stand up on a minute-by-minute, day-by-day basis, and you challenge and you apprehend that rogue authority. Like these swaggering pricks in costume, tasing people in the face, masquerading as being policemen. Take them down, people. This is frontline warfare. There is no law on God's green earth that permissions some uneducated brute with a low IQ to swagger around with guns and tasers and all sorts of shit that they wear and terrorize people in Nazi uniforms. It's disgusting is what it is. It's antithetical to everything we were born to this planet to experience. So let's take it down.
It takes us making the change. You know, we got the nano silver that is on the CDC website, where hidden in plain sight, they say we created Ebola. And it also shows the solution, the nano silver. So we get it to South Africa with Dr. Rima, and they confiscate it three times. And finally it comes in, and the Minister of Health for Sierra Leone stands up and he said, our people have a right to take a supplement. Kicked out the WHO, kicked out the FDA.
Straight away.
And then Ebola is gone.
Remember, I'm a former Director General at the United Nations in the IGO sector.
That's right.
That was 10 years ago. I learnt that stuff firsthand.
Okay.
And I hacked into that godless place precisely in order to learn for myself. I've been preaching for 7 years now about the dangers of the law of first report. You cannot simply read something or take something as said and that's the gospel. You've got to the degree to which you're able in this life, you've got to go and find out for yourself. You've got to meet the man. You've got to exchange fire in the eyes. And I've made it my business in the last 2 decades to do that. So that's the advantage I have over many researchers. And I've got a lot of respect for researchers, but I'm not a researcher. I go and meet people and I sit down and talk and I fly around the world, and I'm constantly doing that. I'm speaking truth to power from a perspective where I understand the metric of power as well. So that's, in a sense, I'm a kind of a jujitsu. When you're aware of the archetypes, you're aware of the language, you're aware of the diplomatic protocols, and so my truth to power, I believe, has got a lot more of a tangible thrust to it. And that's some of what I'm hoping to bring to bear in the work that I do.
Knowledge is power, so knowing the rules, knowing how to break them, and knowing what our rights are. For example, to ask an officer, what am I being charged for, or else I'd prefer to go at this point. People need to be empowered with that knowledge as well.
Indeed.
And so when it comes to sovereignty, what kind of work have you done with yourself to be able to take back your capital letter name that has been created in the birth canal of
I understand.
the United States?
Well, I'm a curious case, because the country in which I was born no longer exists.
Really?
Yeah, I was born in a country called Rhodesia, which stopped existing in 1980 something at the end of the Rhodesian War. The Zimbabwean, struggle for independence, which was part of a proxy bullshit war being played out between the East and the West in Africa, just to carve up resources, and we were on the bitch end of that stick. Myself and my family and a few other families living in the middle of Africa at that time. But the country I was born in doesn't exist any longer. So there is no record of my birth. I read stuff on the internet saying that I was born in such and such a year in such and such a place, and I'm going, well, that's news to me. And that my father is so and so. I hear this stuff. No one actually knows. I do. But the point is, I am very lucky. I was stateless for 10 years. At the end of that war, I was effectively a refugee. I went to the United Kingdom because of my lineage, and they had to allow me in to the country as my sister and I. So for 9 years, I was a refugee. I was without a passport. I was stateless. And then became a British naturalized subject. So I have a citizenship with the Crown, and that stood for, I travel the world on a British passport. Am I able to travel without a passport? The answer is categorically yes. But am I able to under law? Yes, I am allowed to travel without a passport. You need to know how to do it, and it's complicated. We can't get into that on this.
Right.
But I'd be happy to have a full discussion and interview on that subject.
That's something I feel like you have deep knowledge on.
Damn right.
How to empower people to actually be sovereign in that way. Because like in Hawaii, a lot of people become part of the Hawaiian nation.
Yeah.
And they're sovereign in that sense, and it's very empowering, yet they stay in Hawaii. So there's other ways to go about it to be able to still be sovereign to go and travel around the world.
We're involved in the Hawaiian sovereignty issue now,
yeah.
and actually discussing doing a seating of the International Tribunal there in the next couple of months. In point of fact, we've been speaking to a number of people there connected to the hereditary claimant who appears to have the strongest hereditary claim, the king. I'm not going to name the name because of there's a lot of factionalism going on there, and I can't disrupt the law action we're involved in. But the point is,
and I have to add, solidarity with standing for Mauna Kea right now is definitely a powerful movement of the indigenous people standing up for their sacred birthplace.
Absolutely right. I mean, step one, U.S. military bases. Really?
Yeah, right there.
That's the whole story of Hawaii is right there. U.S. military base. That's what Hawaii is. It was weaponized from day one. The gold was stolen on day two. That's a matter for the good Hawaiian people to step up within themselves and reclaim. A Regenesis event needs to occur. It's all to do with consciousness, because that will throw the yoke of the devil off the back. Hawaii in 10 years from now will be redeemed. We'll be moving back without any question of doubt, but not just Hawaii. This is happening from the Aotearoans in the Maori in New Zealand, all the way through to Central Africa, West Africa, Central South America, throughout Southeast Asia. If you saw my talk yesterday, I showed images for the first time, not been seen before, of the big Regenesis event that occurred a few weeks ago in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia.
And you've gathered together dignitaries as well as...
we brought international dignitaries and paramount chiefs and justices and bishops and religious leaders from around the world to come in to the New Earth Haven. We invited them in and they came, and we had 24, 25, 26 sultans, kings and rajas,
and
all turned up.
Amazingly awesome that you had Dr. Mercola as well as Del Bigtree.
What a legend. Yes. Oh, Del, what a beautiful soul. He flew out there when he heard what we were doing. He's like, I'm down for this party. So Del came, and we had a 2-day seating of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into Weaponization of the Biosphere. So we took Del's testimony there.
Yes.
But prior to that, I'd staged a 3-day World Health Sovereignty Summit, because I wanted to get all these guns together to just dump a data dump, a knowledge dump on the horrors being faced by vaccinations, by GMOs, by synthetic molecules, by big pharma crimes, by big agrochemical crimes. All that stuff, that body of knowledge needs to be in a repository. So the World Health Sovereignty Summit is set up to be that repository. And that'll keep growing. We then had the 2-day seating, like I just said, of the Judicial Commission. That's where we took the expert testimony, which became court record.
Nice.
So as we begin to move a counter move against the pharmaceuticals and the agrochemical industries. And yes, absolutely, I'm saying it. Big pharma and big agrochem is a goddamn ecocide and genocide. Let's call it out. That's what it is. That's what these trillion-dollar behemoths are. That's what they were intended to become. And they've done a very fine job of becoming ecocidal and genocidal sociopathic machines. But that said, That age is now over, because I say so, and because you say so, and because everyone with a pulse watching this show says so.
Yes.
The game is over. It's changing.
It is, and when we had Dr. Salah on the show, I just wanted to invite you to hit us both up, because we're there on the Big Island, and we'll help organize or do whatever we can do to gather you know, some more people there. It's amazing to see what you're doing to bring the tribe together and to empower people. You know, you'd really like my dad. My dad's a real hero for the movement. He had cancer of the adrenal gland, a rare form of adrenal gland. His college roommate was Cheech, and Cheech said, if I ever had cancer, he's like, I would smoke as much pot as I could and have as much fun as I can.
Yeah.
And so he got him into smoking pot, and then years later he had no cancer. But my dad wrote the legislation for a voter initiative in California, Proposition 215, and he's been a freedom fighter with these guys, Dennis Perone and Jack Harrar. And so he gets this voter initiative passed.
Very good.
It legalizes it. All the people, I got signatures, we rallied together to legalize this plant, and that has saved his life. And then they show up at his home in Lake Tahoe, and they say, these fags down in San Francisco, that may work down for them, but not up here in Placer County. They come, they raid his house, throw him in jail, and he goes up to Canada to become a reefer refugee up there.
Wow. Spent
10 years of his life there with my sisters, came back down. As the plane lands, they come in, the feds come in and take him off the plane before, you know, stop the plane, throw him in jail, and they fight it aggressively. He's like you. He's very, he goes on the offensive. And they got DAs thrown out, judges thrown out. He got 2 felony charges for a mushroom stem and a little peyote cap. He got the felonies removed. He got all his stuff back, and now he's living a happy life. But it's just, they used his case as a precedence for the whole medical marijuana movement, and going up against big pharma and having something that actually works, because they're at war with our seed supply, they're at war with our food supply, and we have to just look, guys, if you're not eating organic, you're eating pesticides. So stack the odds in your favor and do the best you can to have food grown where you know it is, and don't poison yourself.
And stop paying taxes, stop paying personal income tax. If you pay personal income tax, which incidentally is voluntary, they've even admitted that recently in the last few months from the highest authority in the land, you can do the research. Personal income tax is voluntary. Do not fill out the goddamn forms. If you're a businessman, pay business tax. If you're a merchant, pay merchant tax. That is right and proper action. Do not pay personal income tax.
Thank you.
That is a crime against yourself. You're defrauding yourself, and you're also participating in blood economy. Not $1 from personal income tax goes towards street lamps, other than the weaponized versions. Stop it. Just stop participating in that diabolical blood cult, because that's all it is.
Thank you. I mean, what more can we say? It's $20 trillion going into this 5G infrastructure, and people here have paid for that. People all over the world.
Well, if they paid for it in ways they're not even aware of. This is something I wanted to do a talk about, actually. I didn't have time yesterday, but I want to talk about how money's real value is discharged against birth bonds. So the money that's circulating, these trillions and trillions of dollars, we ask, well, where does it come from? I mean, well, it comes from the fact that you've been traded since you were born, and your birth certificate was flipped into a birth bond, which was logged with the US Treasury Department, and you've been literally traded as chattel, as a birth bond, since the day you were born. So by the time you're 30, 40, 50, you're worth millions and millions of dollars. This is fact. This is not fantasy stuff.
We are
birth
owned,
bonds.
And our capital letter, your capital letter name is a product.
Let me take it to where you need to understand it.
Yeah.
The birth bond has a certain value to it. It doesn't have as much value as a prison bond, however, which is why the entire system conspires to penalize us, ultimately trick us into going to prison, right? That's why the whole system construes and conspires to trick us into prison. Ultimately, they love the fact that you've got hundreds of millions or tens of millions of people in prison in this country, the most populous prisons in the world, in the history of mankind, for good reason, because that is underwriting the economy. When your birth bond is flipped into a prison bond the day you go to prison, and the banksters behind the courtrooms are shuffling the deck, You go straight to prison, your birth bond has a higher value. Now you're making the state, I don't know, $3,000 to $5,000 a day. Okay, that's like a gratuity that they can discharge against your birth bond because you're now a charge of the court. So it's disgusting. But this is the harvest of humanity that's happening behind the veil without us even being aware of it. So that's where the Black Ops budgets are coming from. And these huge budgets, the genesis of these budgets is coming from the discharge against birth bonds, death bonds, and prison bonds. Check it out.
It's been said, I think most recently from the Pleiadian, Tygadian channels where they're not channeling anymore, they're like literally communicating with the ship captains on the computer. And I mean, why not? Why not do it via text? And so they're chatting, and they said that other planets have been more, it's been more of a blatant takeover, where here it's a lot more subtle.
They can't take it over
like
blatantly here.
Jupiter ascending, when they've got these vials of that they've harvested literally from the people that of this fountain of youth formula, but here it's so secretive, and it takes people like you standing up, and you've lit a fire under my butt. I don't know about you guys, but I want to go talk to my mayor and like go, you know, sign some papers and
go and give him a bear hug. Give the mayor a hug. Just tell him, look him in the eye and tell him you love him.
Well, that really dissolves all boundaries.
It does.
So thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to doing more. Let's see what we can create in Hawaii. And as we grow and awaken, just remember, we are dreaming the world awake. Blessings. Bye for now.